I will toss it to.
You were muted. Just.
I'm
Okay.
coming through on yours. We should have just not done this.
All right.
That's why I have my headphone in, because
Yeah?
I'm hearing what's coming through. So
Awesome.
I'm pretty sure people can hear me.
We couldn't hear. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, are you serious?
He introduced us, which is great. So we can just start.
We'll just roll with it.
Yeah, we'll roll with it. It's fine. So
This is why I have to have Slack open.
that's right. So one of the things that we know we're going to do is have a display for whole documents, starting with policy documents. However, we know that that's going to be difficult in terms of a data import process because there's manual steps there. And so as an intermediary, something that we can do right now is to build a sort of policy detail page out of the existing requirements that we have. You'll recall that the requirements that we have been helpfully broken up from the original document. So we can kind of reconstruct that policy document. And so here is some of the very preliminary work on that. This is not meant to be a visual direction, but just a mechanical direction, where we have each of these bits of blue text are what were requirements in the old parlance, but are now more or less paragraphs in this policy detail view world. And we can page through them, go to the bottom. And so this kind of replaces the need to have the filtering requirements by policy. This is all of the requirements within a policy in lexicographical order. We also wanted to allow each of these to be indexable, to be able to jump straight to it, to have a unique URL, and to display metadata for each of these. So these are the original requirements. They have more metadata than any of the paragraphs we would normally have. So when we click on them, we're displaying some of that metadata. The metadata that's here right now, it's not particularly important. We don't know what matters most, but we do know that we want to have some sort of interaction, and we want to be able to have a unique URL per element. Yeah, so we built this. It's clearly not in a visual state that is deployable, and so we aren't linking here from anywhere. And with that, I think Ryan is going to talk about kind of where this will look visually.
Thanks. Let me share my screen somehow. So, Infinity, Ryan. So given that, we have one option is the requirements view, which I can minimize these guys. There we go. Which, as you saw in terms of functionality, it's great to be able to isolate those individual requirements, but in terms of being able to browse each one and kind of indicate one over another, especially initially having to navigate if you don't have the unique URL, how might we solve for just browsing them and locating them? So the first thing I did was just kind of play around with that view was kind of try to understand how someone might see this, right? Maybe we introduced some sort of numbering system, not that much different than like page numbers, paragraph numbers, and sentence numbers, as you would tell someone to find a random page in a book. That might be a way to kind of organize the requirements. But the one challenge there, though, is that you never get to see the requirements in their context. So you don't get to see the details of the policy that where the requirements originally lived. And so I was thinking about, so what if we had the entire policy, because we know that not all policies out there now have requirements. So we have, and then some that have partial requirements, and then I know we're moving towards this kind of full requirements version of the policies. But so I was thinking about like, oh, okay, so what if it was kind of broken up and you were able to navigate them, and this is whatever, nothing special or whatever, and we just kind of have footnotes and la-di-da, and that's great. But then I was thinking about like how might we combine them and be able to see the requirements in context and be able to isolate them. And so I was thinking like, oh, well, what if we, and tell me, by the way, speak up if this is too small to see. So one idea I had was like, oh, we could just kind of have a little highlight, and then, and I just picked random. These aren't actual requirements. I just kind of picked random things. But I just was thinking, oh, we could just kind of nest them inside their main sections if we were, had the luxury of having actual sections. I know that some of these policies are just kind of nothing but a string of paragraphs. But as you can see, you start getting into asking a lot of questions about like, well, how do I link to just this particular policy? How do I, or not policy, requirement? How do I know which one I'm looking at? How do we meet the challenge of accessibility? We can't just use color to identify these things. So one thing that might help, I really like working in a mobile environment because it kind of forces me to make decisions based on all of the, like just a really small amount of real estate. And so this is the same content, but just kind of wrapped, in a mobile environment. And, like, so here, for instance, how would we show if there was a footnote, like many times I feel like there are footnotes, there are more than one footnote in a row. And so we could do something like this where it was consolidated. How would the dropdown actually work? Oh, well, we could browse the different sections. Well, that's fine and dandy, except now I can't, if we remember those requirements, now I can't find those requirements. And this is all just a work in progress. This is just me exploring the ways that we could isolate these requirements. And so, as you can see here, the other problem, right, if you were scrolling, if you opened a menu and you were just, you kind of have this infinite scroll problem. And it's also super dependent on the idea that exactly what number you're looking for, which, we can, there's clearly a lot to talk about here. And then in terms of interactivity, the one other kind of super kind of problem child, if you will, is all the different layers of interactivity that we kind of want to have, which are anchor links to the paragraph or that we want to be able to give people for that unique URL, a visual indicator and a special kind of treatment for requirements themselves. I stole CM's idea of instead of highlighting the entire requirement, we might be able to use the keywords that kind of generated the requirements that might be able to help kind of do that. But again, we can't just use color. We have to use something more than color to indicate that. And then we have external links, and then we have definitions. So you end up with, even if we did color code these, right, like this would turn into just Circus Town. And this is, of course, I'm painting like kind of worst case scenario here, but I don't think it's actually that outside of, these are kind of, layering. I mean, while there might be a bunch of kind of pre-existing functionalities for things like footnotes or things like definitions, when you smash them all together onto the same page, especially on a mobile device, especially when you consider accessibility, it becomes a much more difficult problem to solve. And I think that is, the other thing I was thinking of is what happened if you were to click on this and then little space Star Wars drawer, rolls out and you get to see the isolated view of the requirement. I don't know if this is actually a requirement. I'm just like doing some typesetting, but then you would be able to link to it and all that fun stuff. That's it. If anybody, Carolyn or Micah, if you have anything you want to chime in.
So I think we'll have the call in immediately after that, which might, they can't chime in right now.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, right. That's fine. We're all.
All right, today I'll be playing the role of Lenny. He did a bunch of great work on the interface while Tig and I were focused on structuring the document and figuring out how to both store it and then pull it out in a reasonable system. Lenny worked a lot on cleaning up some front-end things. So let me share my screen. Let's touch on that. So the most notable is that we're trying to de-emphasize requirements. And that means that when we search for things, for example, let's search for, I don't know, cybersecurity. We no longer go to the requirements tab, we go to the policies tab. So policies are much more front and center now. It's difficult to get to the requirements altogether. We removed that link. There is still a remaining method to get to them, but we are removing as much as possible, bringing policies much more front and center. Lenny also covered a lot of mobile fixes. So particularly on the home page, we made this text box much larger. Let me pull up the existing code in another tab so we can compare. Previously, we had this text box for search, rather small, difficult to get to, and it remained the same size regardless of screen. Now we have something that's a little bit more clickable. The flow in terms of the heading between sections is more consistent, and it's more friendly for mobile. And I believe that that was all that Lenny was going to cover. So I think we can close with a yo.
Screens to verify everything. So that's updates. Basically, it's continuing to go forward. Don't have an exact landing date, but we are continuing that work. And I believe also OMB and OGP are talking about sort of how this will be housed in OGP. So it's very exciting. And, kind of a short week, we missed a bunch of the beginning stuff. So I will repeat some of it. If you want to see more of the work that we've done, this is one of our bi-weekly sprint demos. This is part of a playlist on YouTube. You can subscribe to the channel. You can see all of our previous videos. Our next demo will be November 3rd. We had sort of reduced capacity this week due to an all hands and holiday and some sick time. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with more work to show. And now we will jump into our conference call-in line that actually I think we're already on the line. But those of you out in the video land can call in and we will talk live about the work we've been doing and what we should be focusing on for the next 2 weeks after this. So I'll leave that up for a minute while people dial in.